She laughed in the kitchen that morning. Not at anything I said. She was reading something on her phone, thumb flicking the screen while a piece of toast burned in the toaster behind her. That laugh, it wasn't for me. It hadn't been for a long time, and it didn't sound like the tired laugh of someone dragging through the week. It was brighter, alive, private. I stood there watching her, holding a cup of coffee that I hadn't tasted. The sound of her laugh used to do something good to me. Now it felt like being shut out of a party I didn't know was happening in my own house. I asked what was funny. She didn't even glance at me. Nothing, she said. Just work stuff. Work stuff, right? She works in marketing. Or at least that's what she tells me. Lately her work stuff has become this black hole that sucks up evenings, weekends, lunch breaks, even entire nights where she says she's on a project deadline. Once I asked what the project was, and she looked at me like I'd farted in church. I didn't ask again, but I started noticing patterns. Her perfume only made an appearance after 8 p.m. She kept a spare set of clothes in her car, tucked neatly in the trunk next to an old yoga mat I hadn't seen her use in months, and she changed the password on her phone. Here's the thing. I'm not paranoid. I didn't grow up suspicious. I never went through her phone, never stalked her social media. We were never that couple. But there's a point where something shifts, where your instincts stop whispering and start screaming. The final trigger? It was a Friday. I was parked a few blocks from a bar downtown, killing time between rides. I just dropped off a couple on a second date that was clearly going to turn into a third. I was flipping through my playlist, trying to find something that didn't make me want to punch the steering wheel, when I saw her. She didn't see me. She was stepping out of a black SUV. Not her car. Not a cab either. It was too clean, too familiar. She laughed, again with that laugh, and said something to the driver before leaning in close to him. Too close. Then she walked away, fast, confident, like someone who didn't think twice about what she just left behind. But the driver didn't pull away immediately. He just sat there, watching her go. And in that moment I knew. Not from anything she said. Not from evidence or confession. I knew from the way he looked at her walking away. That look didn't belong to a stranger. It wasn't professional. It was loaded. So I followed him. Not far. Just a few blocks. He pulled into a parking garage. 3rd level. Parked in the corner. I waited. Watched. Then I got out of my car and walked up like I belonged there. I didn't know what I was going to do. Confront him? Follow him home? I had no plan. Just this wildfire in my chest. He was still in the car. Alone now. Head back. Smiling. I walked past, pretending not to notice him, and glanced at his dashboard. There was a phone mounted there, open to a text screen. And that's when I saw it. He thinks I know nothing. Just a driver? They forgot why they feared the ghost. I kept walking. Didn't stop. Didn't turn around. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew who sent it. And I knew exactly who it was about. Me. Just a driver. They forgot why they feared the ghost. Let them remember. The next morning I left the house before sunrise. I told her I had an early airport run. She grunted from bed, half awake, not caring. I didn't even have my keys in hand before her phone lit up on the nightstand. She was already texting someone. This time I didn't look. I didn't need to. Instead I drove. Not for work. Just aimless, looping through streets I hadn't touched since college. My mind felt too loud to stay still. I kept hearing that phrase again and again. They forgot why they feared the ghost. Was that him writing it? Her? Was it something they said to each other? Like an inside joke I'd never been invited to? Something they shared, something against me? It wasn't just betrayal, it was mockery. I ended up back at that same garage. 3rd floor. Corner space. I parked 3 rows down this time and waited. No movement. Nothing suspicious. But I wasn't there to catch them in the act anymore. That moment had passed. Now I wanted information. By 10 I had a plan. I texted her. Said my phone was acting weird. Asked her to meet me for lunch near her office. No suspicion. She agreed. When I got there, she was already waiting at the table, scrolling her phone again. You look tired, she said. You look happy, I answered. She smiled, fake and automatic. What's that supposed to mean? I let the silence stretch until it bent. You ever park on level 3 at the Westfield garage? Her fingers stopped on the phone. She didn't look up. What? I was there yesterday. Saw someone who looked like you, getting out of a car that wasn't yours. She finally looked at me, not shocked, not scared, just calculating. Are you following me now? She said, voice calm, almost amused. Wow, that's new. No, I said. Just saw something. Thought I'd ask. She put her phone down slowly and leaned in, folding her hands on the table like a lawyer about to cross-examine. You think I'm doing something behind your back? I know you are. A flicker. Just the slightest twitch in her left eye. I saw it. Then came the practiced cool. I don't have time for this paranoid crap, she said, standing up. You want to dig through parking garages and play spy, go ahead. But don't drag me into your little detective fantasy. I'm working. I have things to do. And then she just left. Walked out. Didn't pay for the drinks. Didn't say goodbye. But something strange happened then. Instead of anger, I felt clear. Like I'd been trapped under ice and suddenly broke through. She didn't deny it. Not really. She flipped it. Deflected. Pushed the spotlight back on me. It wasn't a confession. It was worse. It was the confidence of someone who doesn't need to hide anymore. Because she thinks I won't do anything about it. Because she thinks I'm just a driver. She forgot why they feared the ghost. And now I'm about to remind her I went home that night and didn't say a word to her. Not a glance. Not a sound. I moved like furniture, unnoticed, untouched. She was already on the phone when I walked in, laughing in that too loud, sugar-coated way she only used when she was pretending everything was normal. She walked past me while talking, grabbed a bottle of wine from the kitchen, and retreated upstairs without even acknowledging me, like I was the damn butler in my own house. I didn't follow. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. Not for evidence, I didn't need that anymore. I knew what was happening. No, I needed context. I wanted to know who this man was. The driver. The one with the SUV and the smug little smile. Turns out, it's surprisingly easy to find someone when you know what to look for. A few well-placed questions in an Uber driver forum I used to hang around. A shared plate number spotted in the garage. Some sleuthing through LinkedIn and public social pages, and I had him. Derek Caldwell. He looked like a placeholder human. Generic tan skin, overgroomed beard, gym selfies with captions like, rise and grind. A dude who probably said king to his friends and used energy as a verb. His profile was locked down, but one photo tagged him at a rooftop bar downtown, with my wife in the background, blurry but unmistakable, laughing at something out of frame. So that was it. He wasn't her escape. He was her replacement plan. I stared at the screen, my fists clenching not in anger, but in calculation. And then I saw the comment thread under one of his recent posts. Keep stacking wins, my man. Ghost mode. Ghost mode. There it was again. That word. That idea. That little inside symbol they kept dropping like breadcrumbs. And suddenly I saw the full picture. I wasn't just being replaced. I was being turned into a story. A joke. A fable they told each other. He thinks I don't know. Just a driver. I walked upstairs slowly, calmly, rehearsing nothing. She was in bed, robe on, glass of wine resting on her stomach like a pet. I stood in the doorway until she looked up. Do you need something? She asked. I met Derek today, I said flatly. Her eyes didn't even twitch. She didn't flinch. But her hand moved the wine glass to the nightstand deliberately, slowly, like she was prepping for something. You what? Saw him. Talked for a minute. Nice guy. Clean car. She sat up straighter. Why would you? I didn't say who I was. I cut her off. Didn't want to ruin the surprise. There it was. Panic. Subtle. Almost hidden. But real. She swung her legs off the bed, stood, and crossed her arms. You're being insane. Am I? I said. Because you're shaking a little. That's not what people do when they're innocent. That's what they do when the curtain just got yanked open. She stepped closer, tried to regain control. What exactly do you think you've figured out? I smiled. Not kindly. Everything. Enough. More than enough. She stared at me like I just said something in another language. And then, like a switch flipping, she rolled her eyes and walked past me toward the bathroom. You always want to play the victim, she called over her shoulder. Enjoy your little detective fantasy. She locked the door behind her. That was the moment I realized she wasn't afraid of being caught. She was afraid I might finally stop being quiet. She forgot why they feared the ghost. Tomorrow, she'll remember. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the bathroom fan she always forgets to turn off. She was curled up beside me like nothing had happened, like the air between us wasn't thick with poison. I could feel the warmth of her body, and it made me sick. Not because of what she'd done, but because I used to find comfort in it. She mumbled something in her sleep. A name, not mine. It sounded like his. I got up, walked downstairs, sat in the dark kitchen with a notebook and a pen. I started writing. Not a letter, not a goodbye. No, this was a ledger. Plan. She made me the ghost. I was going to show her what a ghost could do. The next day, I called out of my ride queue and headed to her office building. I waited in the cafe across the street, pretending to sip coffee, pretending not to watch. But I saw her, leaving early, not with coworkers, alone. Except she wasn't. 2 minutes later, his SUV pulled up. Same black vehicle, same plate. She got in. No hesitation. Not even a glance around. She felt untouchable. I followed. They drove to a house I didn't recognize. Not his profile said he rented a loft. This was some quiet little suburban home in a neighborhood where no one asks questions and everyone keeps their blinds drawn at dusk. They stayed inside for 2 hours. I didn't move. I memorized every detail of the house. The address, the windows, the way they left the porch light on even during the day. When they came back out, she was laughing again. Not fake, not forced. She touched his arm. He touched the small of her back. She was glowing. That glow? That used to be mine. That night, I didn't say a word. I let her talk about some fake meeting she had. I nodded, said wow at the right times. I even made her tea. She kissed me on the cheek before bed. That was new. But it wasn't affection. It was arrogance. She thought I was broken, passive, dull. She thought her lies had won. But while she slept, I went back to the notebook. I wrote everything down. Every detail of that day. Every timestamp. Every lie she told when she got home. I wasn't collecting proof anymore. I was building something else. A memory she wouldn't be able to rewrite. Because ghosts don't just haunt. They document. And the next step was already in motion. 2 days later, I sent her a text. Simple. Clean. Lunch today? Got something to tell you. She replied instantly. Sure, smiley face. Where? That smiley, fake as the rest of her, felt like a slap. I picked a quiet place. Not a restaurant. A park near where we used to walk our dog before she got too busy. And I had to put him down alone. I got there first. Sat on the bench facing the pond, watching geese fight over breadcrumbs. She showed up in designer boots and sunglasses too big for her face. She sat beside me like we were just two people catching up. So, she said, brushing imaginary lint off her coat. What's this about? I pulled a folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. She unfolded it, stared. It was a copy of a printout, a still frame, her getting into his SUV. Timestamped. I didn't say a word. She didn't flinch. Instead, she folded it back up like it was a receipt and tucked it into her bag. You've been following me, she said. No anger. Just boredom. I've been watching, I corrected. There's a difference. She leaned back, letting out a sigh like I just told her the wrong grocery list. Is this what we're doing now? Surveillance? Stalking? Truth, I said. We're doing truth. She shook her head. You're spiraling. This isn't healthy. I turned to her then, for the first time really looked at her. And there was something wild behind her eyes. Not guilt, not shame. Control. That's what this had always been. She didn't want to be with him because he was better. She wanted the upper hand. And I was the one stupid enough to give it to her every time I let her rewrite the story. I know everything, I said quietly. The garage, the house, the texts, the laughing, all of it. She went still for half a second. Then she smiled. You want me to say it? She asked, voice smooth. You want me to admit it? Fine. I'm seeing someone. There. Does that make you feel better? Didn't. Because I already knew. What hit me like a truck was the way she said it. Not sorry. Not defensive. Just flat. Like it was nothing. like I was nothing. He makes me feel alive, she added casually. You just drift, like you're part of the furniture now. There it was, the nail. You're not even angry, I said. I was angry, for years. I'm over it now. She stood up, smoothed her coat, and looked down at me like she was closing the door on a job interview. I don't want to fight. Let's not make this dramatic. You don't get to define dramatic, I said. But she was already walking away. And for the first time in this whole mess, I didn't feel confused, or hurt, or even betrayed. I felt ready, because when someone sees you as a ghost, they forget what you can do when you move in silence. They forget that ghosts don't shout. They haunt. And I was about to become unforgettable. She didn't come home that night, didn't text, didn't call. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, watching the front door like it owed me something. Her absence wasn't surprising. What surprised me was how calm I felt. No panic, no pacing, just this eerie stillness inside, like something had finally settled. Around 2:37 a.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. No headlights, quiet engine. I didn't even have to look out the window. She came in with her shoes in her hand, trying to be silent. I didn't say a word, just watched her from the shadows. She didn't see me. She went straight upstairs. That night was the official end of pretending. The next morning I left early, took the day off driving. Instead, I made 3 stops. 1. A visit to a friend of mine who owed me a favor. A quiet guy, works in data recovery. The kind of man who doesn't ask questions but always delivers answers. I handed him her old phone. One she thought I threw out last year when she upgraded. 2. The office supply store. Picked up a discreet little voice recorder. 3. Her office. I waited in the parking garage, 3rd level, same spot. This time she wasn't with Derek. She was alone. She didn't see me until she was halfway to the elevators. Her eyes landed on me and froze. What are you doing here? She asked, guarded. I smiled. Just wanted to see you. Talk. Clear the air. She looked around, cautious. I don't have time for this right now. You don't want to talk in front of the cameras? I asked softly. Or is it the wrong building? She blinked, hesitated. What are you implying? I stepped closer, held up a tiny USB. Let's just say the ghost's memory is better than you thought. She reached for it without thinking. I pulled it back. I'm not giving it to you, I said. I just want you to know it exists, and so do 3 backups. Her mouth opened, then shut. For the first time, she looked rattled. I'm not the one you should be afraid of, she said, quieter. Then who is? She didn't answer, just turned and walked away. But something in her eyes changed. The arrogance cracked. Just a sliver. That night, she was home by 6, made dinner, sat across from me like we were on a first date. She asked about my day, told me hers. Not once did she mention him. I watched her try to stitch the curtain back closed, but I'd already seen behind it. After dinner, she poured wine, offered me a glass. I didn't take it. Instead, I said, I know about the others too. Her hand froze mid-pour. What others? She asked, but her voice had dropped. Don't pretend. Don't insult what little intelligence you used to respect. She stared at me for a long time, then softly, You have no idea what this is really about. Then tell me. She smiled. Not kindly, not cruelly, just tired. It was never about love. Not for me. It was about leverage. There it was. No metaphor. No code. Just the naked truth. I stood up. Quiet. Calm. Ready. And as I walked past her toward the door, I said, You think this ends with me watching you walk away? She said nothing. But I didn't need her words. The game had shifted. And she finally started to realize ghosts don't leave. They stay. And they changed the ending. I didn't go home that night. I drove for hours, but not to escape. I wasn't hiding, I was sharpening. Thinking. She made it clear. This wasn't a love story gone cold. It wasn't about emotion or attraction or boredom. This was warfare, and I'd been losing without knowing it. Leverage. That was her word. Her whole strategy. Every smile, every silence, every late night out. She wasn't cheating to leave. She was cheating to own. So I stopped playing defense. Early the next morning, I sent Derek a message. Not threatening, not aggressive, just a polite little sentence. You ever wonder if she's lying to you, too? His response came 2 hours later. Who is this? I didn't reply. That was enough. The seed was planted. Let it rot from the inside. Meanwhile, the data guy came through. He handed me an organized folder, cleanly labeled. Extracted messages, backups, notes, and an audio file. You might want to sit down when you listen, he warned. I didn't. I played it in the car. It was a recording from a month ago. Her voice, in our living room, laughing, low and venomous. He still thinks I don't know about his little tracking apps. Let him play ghost. He's nothing. Just a driver. He'll never leave, he's too weak. That's the beautiful part. There was another voice. Female. A friend? I didn't recognize it. So you're staying? Of course. He's convenient. He pays for everything, barely talks back. And if he ever snaps, I'll just say he's unstable. I've been keeping screenshots in case I need a good meltdown scene. I hit pause. Let the silence expand. So that was her exit strategy. Gaslight me, paint herself the victim, walk away clean with the narrative already gift-wrapped. She really thought I wouldn't fight back. That night I came home. She was in the kitchen, pretending to read, wine untouched beside her. I dropped the folder on the table without a word. She looked at it, didn't touch it. What's that? She asked. Proof. She stared for a moment, then calmly pushed the wine glass aside. You know what happens next, she said. I do, I answered. She stood up, walked to the sink, and started washing her hands. Slowly, deliberately, like she was scrubbing away any trace of what was coming. You're not as clever as you think, she said. This won't end the way you want. I'm not looking for an ending, I said. I'm writing the second half. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands, and met my eyes. No one will believe you. I'm not asking them to. And I walked upstairs. That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. Not because it was over, because I knew she finally understood something. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to ruin the script. She wrote me as a ghost. But ghosts rewrite history. She tried to flip the narrative within 48 hours. I expected it. It was her nature. First, the sudden tenderness. Morning coffee made without asking. My favorite breakfast, burnt, but effort was the message. She even put on music we used to like. Songs she once said made her feel trapped in a stale memory. I know we've been off lately, she said over eggs and toast. Maybe we should talk to someone. A therapist. Work through things like adults. The performance was Oscar level. Concern in her voice, softness in her eyes, that slight tremble in her hands that used to mean vulnerability. But now it was all strategy. I let her speak. Let her lay the track she planned to walk away clean on. Then I dropped one line. I've already spoken to someone. A lawyer. Her face didn't fall. It froze. Completely. Why would you do that? She asked like I just smothered a child. Because I'm not convenient anymore. She stared at me, jaw tightening, the mask slipping just slightly. You're going to destroy everything over one mistake? I laughed. Actually laughed. One, I said. You don't make the same mistake in 4 zip codes and call it a moment of weakness. She pushed her chair back. So that's it? We're just throwing everything away? Just like that? I'm not throwing it away. I'm handing it back to you. Burn it, chew it, fake cry over it. I don't care. It's yours. The silence that followed was volcanic. She stood there, fists clenched, chest heaving like she was trying to cry but couldn't access the right tear. Then her voice dropped to that cold, sharpened tone she only used when she was done pretending. You think anyone's going to believe your side? You think they'll see you as the victim? You've got no proof I did anything wrong. You're just bitter and desperate. If I tell them you were controlling, unstable, tracking me, who do you think they'll side with? And there it was. The real plan. I stepped toward her, slowly, and set a small envelope on the counter. Inside, a copy of the audio file. The one where she laid out her entire playbook. Her hand hovered over it. She didn't open it. Didn't need to. I already sent it to my lawyer, I said. And 2 friends. You burn this house down, you burn with it. The look she gave me wasn't anger. It was calculation. You're really going to war with me? I leaned in, whispered it so close she could feel the words land. You already declared it. I'm just not pretending it's peacetime anymore. She didn't answer, just turned, grabbed her keys, and left. She didn't slam the door. She never would. She wasn't messy. No, she was tactical. And now, she was spiraling. She built this empire of deception brick by brick, and now she saw the cracks. Not from an explosion, but from quiet, methodical dismantling. I wasn't rage. I wasn't heartbreak. I was her consequence. And the ghost she thought she could control just walked out of her story and started writing his own. The day after she left, I changed the locks. She texted at noon. You're making this worse than it needs to be. I didn't reply. She showed up that night anyway, just like I knew she would. Knocked twice, no doorbell, quiet enough to seem civil, loud enough to remind me she still thought she had the right. I opened the door but didn't let her in. Her face was tired. No makeup, hoodie, no effort. A version of herself she only pulled out when she wanted to play the wounded spouse. You really locked me out of my own house? She asked, wrapping her arms around herself like she was cold. You said it was a prison, I replied. You should be thanking me. She gave me that tight little smirk. The one she used in arguments when she thought she'd found a weak spot. This is petty. No. Petty is what you did when you sent those texts to your friend about your fake meltdown plan. Petty is manipulating someone who trusted you for leverage. This is called consequences. She stepped forward, crossed the threshold, but I didn't move. We stood inches apart, her perfume faint but familiar, sickening now. Where's the folder? She asked. I tilted my head. Which one? You're bluffing, she snapped. You don't have anything that matters. I pulled out my phone, opened the secure folder, played the recording. Not all of it, just the part where she said, let him play ghost. He's nothing, just a driver. She tried to grab the phone. I pulled it back. I told you, I said calmly. Ghosts don't shout. They haunt. That's when the real her came out. I should have left you a year ago, she hissed. You were already fading. I stayed out of pity. You don't intimidate me. You're pathetic. No, I said. I was patient. And that patience gave you rope. She blinked. Once, twice. She was trying to calculate again, search for the angle, the next move, the narrative pivot. But she was out of map. And then, the final blow. I sent the audio to Derek too. That did it. Her whole face cracked. The chill turned to full panic. Fast and ugly. What the hell did you do? She said. I told him the truth. Let's see if your charm survives without the lies. She laughed. High and sharp and bitter. You think you're the hero? You're just bitter I outgrew you. No, I said. You didn't outgrow me. You outgrew decency. And now you're just shrinking back into what you really are. She tried to slap me. She actually tried. But I didn't flinch. I just stepped back, slowly closed the door, and locked it. She screamed something through it. I didn't hear the words. I didn't need to. For the first time, her voice didn't have power. It sounded like wind in an empty room. And I was finally gone from her story. But she was still trapped in mine that I didn't see her for weeks after that night. The silence was intentional on both sides. She knew she couldn't spin the story anymore. Not with the audio. Not with the texts. Not with Derek turning cold the minute he found out she'd been playing him too. Yes, he messaged me back. A short, stiff sentence. Didn't know. Thanks. That was it. The golden boy SUV driver, the one she clung to for her escape plan, went radio silent. Ghosted her. Fitting, really. She tried damage control after that. Reached out to friends, mutuals, spun it like I'd hacked her phone. Like I was obsessed. Like I snapped. But none of it stuck. Because ghosts don't shout, remember? They document. And I documented everything. Quietly. Carefully. No smear campaign. No firestorm. Just facts. Timeline. Receipts. Calm answers when people asked. Letting her run wild with stories while I waited for them to circle back and compare notes. And when they did, she lost the audience. It all fell apart like wet paper. The leverage she thought she had? Gone. The sympathy card? Shredded. The new guy? Vanished. And me? I didn't crawl away. I stood taller. She tried one last time, of course. They always do. Sent a letter. Handwritten. No apology, just a masterclass in gaslight gymnastics. How she missed the real me. How she overreacted to stress. How we should talk. For closure. I didn't reply. Because closure isn't something she gets to request like an Uber ride. Closure happened the moment I stopped begging her to see me and started seeing myself. I filed for divorce. Clean. Swift. All documents in order. No theatrics. She signed. Eventually. And when the final paper came in the mail, I held it in my hands for a long time. Not because I was sad, but because it meant the haunting was over. She wrote me off as a ghost. Invisible. Powerless. Just a driver. But ghosts? They don't stay dead. They rewrite endings. And now, I'm not haunted anymore. I'm free. To anyone reading this, if you've been made small, made quiet, made to believe your instincts are crazy, you're not. You're just in a story someone else is writing. Start your own. Burn the old script. And don't wait to be seen. Let them remember why they feared the ghost.